Welcome to the soap opera of the stars for the fourth week of July, the 22nd to the 28th of July. About 2 years ago, I started looking at astrology and human design from a very novice perspective, where I wanted to understand what these two aspects were and how they impacted our lives. As I saw the relevance to my own life, I also started using it with clients in my intuitive energy practice. And I found that they very much informed what was happening for my clients in the times that I was working with them. The soap opera of the stars is my way of putting together astrology and human design in a way that is a story format and hopefully is more playful, is lighter, but still talks to the themes that are relevant to our lives. My aim is that you do not need to know astrology or human design, but just by hearing these stories, you're able to understand that there are influences beyond us that are working on us and how those influences may be impacting you in different areas of life. So let us begin with the stories. Mars is still feeling so delighted by the strange turn of events last week that resulted in Saturn being willing to help him with his docuseries without his even having to ask. Mars is taking a break from the hectic pace he has been working at, fueled by the efficiency of Virgo. He inhales the strange mix of fragrance in Virgo's very large and very intelligently designed sauna. There were little cubicles for those who wanted to go at it alone, and a few nooks that Mars could only describe as love seats, though he may be seeing wrong through all the steam, but they were very distinctly designed to look like they fulfilled a couple's purpose. And then there were the curved seating spaces, which even had drink holders, and Mars assumed were used by groups of people. And then there was this comfy, lean-back sort of bench that Mars was on, and marveled that the mechanism to push back did not snag in the humidity. And just as he was observing and drifting, into the peaceful sauna popped Saturn's projection, causing Mars to frantically put the towel that had been slipping off back in place. Mars was dumbfounded. Saturn's projection in 3D, which was clearly photoshopped to give him a different looking skin and a different looking figure, was looking phenomenal in a towel. Saturn seemed oblivious to the impact he'd had on Mars, but looked extremely down at the mouth. I was feeling lonely, he threw at Mars as a way of explaining this completely incredulous, unannounced visit. And Mars, realizing his mouth was still open, shut it. There's something about having family around one that I really miss in this life, says Saturn. And Mars nods, still feeling befuddled and not knowing whether it was the fumes or Saturn's presence or both that was making him feel this way. Saturn sidles closer to Mars and puts his arms on the back of the bench, almost touching Mars's shoulder, making Mars worry Saturn was going to ask for a cuddle. Yeah, well, but spending alone time once in a while to recharge is good, says Mars, trying to make a point. Honestly, we are a family and we're actually all in each other's faces and business all the time with our plans and discussions. And Mars breaks off as Saturn pats him on the shoulder in a very there, you don't need to explain these things to me sort of way. Just as Mars is trying to figure what the gesture and words meant, why Saturn was there, was he being dismissed or comforted, or was there something else on the agenda? In pops Jupiter. Thanks for letting me use your machine, says Jupiter, clearly not bothered using the filters that Saturn had used because, as per Jupiter, he was gorgeous as is. And he plonks himself between Saturn and Mars on that already narrow bench. Mars is a little relieved of the distance from Saturn, but then begins to feel a little suffocated. Good to see you taking a break, Mars, says Jupiter, slapping his knee, making Mars want to jump up and almost scream boundaries, but somehow managing to keep it together. I thought you'll be all work and no play here. Yeah, well, says Mars. I had come here to think, and I've been here a while, so before I get all pruny, I'm moving out. And he tries to move as if to get up when Jupiter catches onto him and stops him. But I just got here, Jupiter says, grinning. And Mars realizes he may need to stick around for a couple of minutes more. So, Jupiter says, I'm getting into reading the book Mercury and Uranus wrote in Taurus. And I've actually decided to put my project on hold for a while. Oh, say both Mars and Saturn together? Yeah, I'm going to be in Taurus for a while and I'm going to let inspiration strike when it needs to. I was just feeling like I was plagiarizing and copying with my wanting to do this at the same time as you, Mars, and Venus were planning it, says Jupiter, looking from Saturn to Mars, and I decided it was making me feel ick. So instead, I'm going to be helping Venus with her project. And I heard that the two of you are getting along quite well on the docuseries, he says, slapping both their thighs and making Mars shake his head in wonder at how Jupiter always managed to make things weird. Eventually, the trio breaks away and go on to their respective homes, Mars heading straight to making a task list, given he and Saturn had agreed to regular meetings. Outside the sauna, of course, and fully clothed and distance, Mars added in his head. Mars was quite clear he was going to be prepared and not give Saturn an opportunity to lecture him. Saturn, on the other hand, went to visit Venus and Mercury in Leo. Venus was soon going into retreat and she would be meeting up with Mercury, and Saturn thought he should share some tips on his currently being on retreat, help her out as a good family person. Venus wasn't sure she needed Saturn's help and was sure she wasn't going to be like Saturn on the retreat, but patiently heard him out, letting her know that she should do as Mars was doing and make lists. Mercury was making himself scarce and had let Saturn know he would see him next week. Venus promised to speak with Mercury about his tips and tricks when she met him later in the week. Before we come back to Venus, though, we need to attend a party, which is for Sun moving into Leo, a procession that would put the richest king on the planet to shame. Leo was bedecked in different hues of gold and sparkles. There were all kinds of welcoming performances. There were drinks and food and music and dancing. The only attendees, though, were Pluto, Nona Shona, which is the North Node and the South Node, Neptune. Now, Venus was planning her retreat. Mercury was hiding, given they thought it was all too bright and noisy, and they had heard of Sun's experience in Cancer from Moon and didn't want to risk anything more. The rest had declined the invitations or not been invited. Pluto was clearly not impressed at this grand show and let Sun know that given he moved into Leo every year, there really didn't need to be such a display and that resources needed to be used with care. Sun, of course, wasn't about to let Pluto know that they recycled most of what she was seeing here, and this was more a show in the sky than a true blue royal welcome, really. Sun was instead regaling Nona and Shona with stories from Cancer, and they were having a good time letting Sun know their discoveries in Aries and Libra respectively, and together playing a fun game around guessing Mars's and Venus's quirks based on these inputs from the different houses. Pluto was, of course, huffing at the nodes as well, given some veiled comparisons that they'd made to Scorpio, and they were trying to avoid paying too much attention to her, knowing they were being fed on the bravado and Leo and would regret this later. Neptune arrived and sat next to Pluto, distracting her and making them all heave a sigh of relief, which Neptune playfully acknowledged by winking at the Sun. And now we move on to Venus, who after weeks of thinking, planning and discussing, has decided her retreat begins now. The fact that Chiron was going to be in a much longer retreat sort of made her feel better. She intends to relook at all that she has been doing in Leo so far and get down to writing her memoirs. She had many ideas on how she was going to look, but the one thing she was thinking was important to communicate was the need for consistency and perseverance. She really liked what Uranus had said about needing to communicate the daily choices that make for a life well lived. The fact that sometimes you need to change your mind or your direction before you find the right one. And that as challenging as it may feel, once what you find lights you up, the strength to see it through will also make itself known to you. As she looked up from her musings over her cup of tea, she saw Mercury enter the room looking kind of serious. "What's up?" she asked them. And they replied with what had transpired with Pluto and how bad they felt at that exchange and having riled Pluto up, and how they were actively avoiding everyone, but had decided they needed to spend some time learning a little more about themselves. that they were always so abuzz with ideas, but that they needed to walk their talk and think through what they had the resources to work on. Venus, of course, immediately shared with them how she'd been thinking on similar lines and asked Mercury what they thought of it. She shared with them how she had roped in Uranus and Jupiter to help and what Uranus had said. Well, sounds exactly like what he would say, smiles Mercury, remembering their time in Taurus and sighing as if feeling better. Have you spoken to Nonna and Shona recently? Asked Venus. And as if they heard her, they were informed that the nodes were visiting. I came to say how much I love Libra, says Shona, and to say thank you for the veggie garden in Taurus, says Nonna, grimacing a little. Venus laughs and welcomes them and goes off to see if they can get more tea. The nodes look at Mercury and let them know they heard what happened and that in all likelihood Pluto had forgiven them, given how sweetly they had worded the apology note that they sent her. Mercury cheered up a bit as the nodes also filled them up on their new areas of study and how chaos did go hand in hand with new beginnings, but that as long as they were clear on what their goals were, they would find a way to get them done. As we wrap up the month of July, the stars seem to be saying that now that we've done a lot of the thinking and some feeling, we need to get into our bodies and give it a bit of a rest. Taking that little break is important to get clear and allow our system to help us get over the initial excitement or anxiety and understand what really lights us up about this new venture we're thinking of getting into. If any of these stories have resonated with you, please let me know. Please like the video, please share with others, please leave a comment, and please do subscribe to this channel. If you would like to work with me on any of these topics that have come up that seem to be relevant to your life, please DM me on Instagram at Pallavi108. You can leave a comment here, or you can email me on aswanis.pn@gmail.com. My different offerings are an energy reset for you in case some of this brings up some sort of pain and you'd like to release it. I also do timeline resets, which will take us through your current life up to conception, past lives, ancestral history, to see if there are any blocks that we need to release, which will make this time easier. Or I do relationship resets, where it can involve 2 or more people, where you can work on it individually, but these relationships can be seen in terms of their energy imprint and what can be done to help them get better. Similarly, I work on spaces like homes or offices or factories, etc., on helping to reset the energy imprint there. Now, if any of this seems like something you'd like to do, you already have my details and I look forward to hearing from you. Thank you for listening, and I would like to send you all the love that I can channel.